Yo, yo, yo. Hey, I'm Mark Buckner with the Mark Buckner Group and the Ben Lawless team from Chicago. Today is a special day. I'm here with Brent Kilmer in Centennial, Wyoming.
Yep.
At the V-Bar Guest Ranch Bread and Breakfast, and we are being cowboys with a true cowboy. And today we're talking small business of a rancher. And I'm telling you, like, I've been thinking about this literally for a couple weeks.
Okay.
And so excited to spend time with you. Little background for you. My wife and I, this is our third time out here, so we've gotten to know Brent a little bit. It's like I haven't seen him in 9 years, and we just picked up where we left off.
For sure.
So first off, give us just a little background on Brent Kilmer, where he grew up, what the experience of becoming, I don't know, a cowboy or running a ranch. Like, give us a little background from childhood up to, running this place.
So I grew up on a ranch that my great-grandfather bought in the early 1900s. He moved there in 1916. I'm not really sure when he bought it, but we're getting really close to having it for 100 years in the family. He bought it around 1930. And then my grandpa,
was that in Centennial then?
No, this is eastern Wyoming, a town called Lusk. We live north of there, and so that's where I grew up, almost in Nebraska, but not quite.
So how far is that from here?
It's a 3-hour drive.
Okay.
In Wyoming, everything's measured in how long it takes to drive there.
So 150 miles, something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, so I just grew up ranching. My dad's an only child, so we leased a place next to the original ranch, and knowing that my dad would take over.
So eventually. A lot of people that will watch this in Chicago, right? They don't know what ranching means. Does that mean I'm running cattle? Does that mean?
Yeah, we had cattle and sheep actually, and kind of worked in conjunction with my grandpa's cattle. So we just kind of all ran it together basically, and we leased a lot of land around it too. So I mean, roughly between what we were leasing and grandpa's land and his leases, we controlled probably around 10,000 acres.
Wow.
But Wyoming is one of those where it takes a lot of acreage to grow cattle, so nothing like Arizona. But anyway, so
so when you're raising cattle, we have how many bulls, and we're using bulls, and we're raising them for beef.
Right. So in prairie country like that, you can get by with a bull per 50 head. When you get into rougher country, like our cattle spend the summer in the national forest up here in the mountains, we want way more bulls than that. So we have 180 cows, and we run 6 bulls with them.
Here.
Yeah, once they get in the rocks and the timber, they get lazy, they get tired, they get sore-footed, and so you need quite a few bulls to make sure they get them all bred. So.
When you were growing up, how many were you raising?
I think Dad most of the time on average had around 100 cows. Grandpa probably had like 150. But we would summer cattle. It's really good summer grass cattle country. So, my dad went back and forth from running his own to just pasturing cattle for other people. But usually we had somewhere around 600 or 700 yearlings. And then Grandpa would have another 200 or 300 yearlings for the summer. So
like 1,000 heads.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Growing up.
Mm-hmm. And then we had, at one point when I was growing up, we had 900 sheep too. So.
And a team of how many?
Oh, for work, just family. It was just us.
Just family. It was like you, your father, and your mother, and your grandfather.
Right, and us, I'm not sure my parents always thought I was worth a lot, but, we definitely had to work. But I love it because it was a great way to grow up.
So in the summer, it's easy. They can graze on the grass. What are we doing in the dead of winter? How is the cattle getting fed, and how are we managing that?
Well, that's why I wouldn't agree with summer being easy, because you put up hay and you spend the summer doing that. Where I grew up is what they call dry land hay. You can't irrigate. There's no center pivots really. So you had to put up thousands of acres of hay to be able to feed the cattle through the winter.
So you had to grow the hay.
Yep, and harvest it. And you know, hay equipment is expensive, so our equipment was never very good. And by the time we paid it off, it was wore out. And so we were always working on it, and it was quite a deal.
So you learned about cattle, you learned about horses, and you learned about equipment.
Yeah, you know, it was neat because I just have one brother, and he's very mechanical. And he could jump on a horse and be darn good help any day of the week, but he never really was as, I don't know, I guess in tune with the livestock part. But he could take apart a diesel engine one time and put it all back together and know exactly how it works, and he's just wicked smart that way.
So one thing about this ranch that is absolutely amazing, one is you ride about, what, 5 hours a day? 2 different rides?
4 or 5 hours, yep.
And you guys, it's not just the trails on their ranch. You load them up in a semi and cart all the guests to another ranch where we can go on a ride. We do a cattle run. Mm-hmm. But what I was wondering about is running a guest ranch is just like, who's taking care of it? You got semi, you got all types of equipment that I'm assuming to save costs, you're trying to work and manage those yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. You know, we hire help, but the odds of finding someone that can just jump in as a mechanic is pretty slim. And you know,
did you learn some of that? It sounds like your brother was a natural at that.
Right. Definitely learned some, but I would not call myself a mechanic. But I know, sometimes I know where to kick it and where to hit it with the wrench, you know. But it's tough because, yeah, we end up doing a lot of that. But if I know we got a problem, then I get up at 5 and I go fix it, you know. And sometimes we have help that really knows how to do that. I have a great hired hand now, Cuppy, and he knows everything I know, and so it's just pretty cool because we can help each other out. But we don't always have that, you know. And
I mean, I imagine a mechanic out here to get them on sites at least $100 an hour at least.
I suppose we hardly ever, you know, if anything else, well, since we have equipment to haul it, we usually would haul something in, and then lease to be a little cheaper. But the same thing goes for vet work and everything. You know, I can do some things up to a point. Usually vet work's pretty clear. It's like you take one look at the injury or with sickness or whatever and think, okay, I think I can do this. I've seen this before, or heck, we got to go to town. You know?
So I'm assuming you do all your own shoeing on the horses and the cattle.
Well, cattle don't get shoes, but I used to do all the shoeing. Thank goodness business is good enough. I wouldn't have time. And so
that's the other thing. That's one of my questions. But
during the recession, the 2008 recession stuff, I was doing all the shoeing. We didn't have as many guests and everything, so that was an easy way to cut cost, because that's at least $100 a horse, and they get it 3 or 4 times a season. So when you have 90 horses, that adds up pretty darn fast.
So I'm assuming they wear out during the summer with heavy guest rides. What about the winter?
We take the shoes off for the winter. Yeah, they will get snowballs in their shoes if we leave them on.
Oh.
And everything, and then of course you just have to keep maintaining them during the winter.
In the winter, what is that like? I'm assuming. Tell us what the shoe does during the summer and what the shoe doesn't do in the winter, and why.
Right.
Like besides icing up on the hoof.
There's a lot.
Why can I get away without a shoe in the winter as a horse?
Okay. So depending on whether you're using them. So our main herd doesn't really get used during the winter. They get the winter off. It would just be another expense to have to bring them in and redo shoes just because they're getting long. In the winter, you would have to add a pad that would pop the snow out. I've literally seen, if we got a storm, you know, before we got all the shoes pulled, we've had that before. And they will pack it so hard it'll look like a softball under their foot, and their ankles roll, and if they get on the ice, it's a bad deal. And I literally have to take a hammer and chisel to knock them out. God. So you have to have them off. Now, if you are using horses, because of course we have cattle, so we still have some to do cattle work, we'll put winter shoes on them, and usually some traction, we call it borium, and then a pad that'll pop the snow out.
Oh.
It's just a little rubber pad, basically. That there's a bunch of different options, but so yeah, we'll do that for just the horses that we keep around to do our cattle work with and such. So yeah.
So, stepping back, grew up on a ranch with your folks, 3 hours away, right? College education?
Long story short, was my music teacher we had a super music program growing up, and it was.
Did you play guitar? I remember that.
Yeah, I actually majored in voice and trumpet in college, though. But the gist is, I came from those little town where it wasn't uncool to do music. I mean, our teacher was a big, tough guy, and he was awesome, and we turned out a lot of music majors because we thought, hey, this is fun. You didn't know it was supposed to be weird until you got to college and stuff, you know. But so my music teacher knew I wanted to come back to the ranch, my family's ranch. And he said, you should be a music teacher. And I said, oh, I'm just going to come home and run the ranch. And him, being much wiser, said, well, is that ranch going to support you and your new family and your parents? And I'm a junior in high school, so I went, I don't know, you know. And he said, he goes, well, you'd be a great music teacher. And he says, I'm only going to teach another 6 years. And he kept hinting, and he's like,
holy cats, he was teeing you up in high school.
Yeah, so he said,
he saw talent in you.
Right. Well, and I said, I was like, I should be a music teacher, and he was like, you should be a music teacher, because he knew we'd need supplemental income. And so then I wrapped my head around it and knew that I could do that, live at the ranch, because it's not too far from town. And then when Mom and Dad were done, maybe someday I'd probably quit teaching and just run the ranch. So that was the plan. Like, even the superintendent of our school would check in to see how I was coming along.
Age 15.
Because
life was planned out.
Kinda. But those little towns, they want people that really want to stay there.
Yeah.
Because they get stuck with people that's the only job they can get. You know what I mean? And so it's always this turnover, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And so, you know, to have someone that you knew wanted to be there, I was kind of a shoo-in. And so that was the plan. And then he taught 1 more year after I graduated. We went to Colorado, and I got a teaching job, and it was great. I got to coach wrestling and all that. It was fun.
So where'd you go to school?
The University of Wyoming.
Oh.
Yeah.
All
but
right.
then Carrie's grandpa gave us the chance to run this place, or he was maybe going to sell it. So we couldn't really hem and haw about it. We thought, well, we better try it now.
And how long ago was this?
That was 19 years ago.
How long have you been married?
19 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you got, what were you, 20?
I don't even know.
22?
But yeah, 24-ish. Yeah.
Did you meet Carrie
at the university? Yep.
Freshman year, sophomore year?
No, because I went to Casper College, junior college, for 3 years first, and then met her here. Honestly, I met her in church. My cousin and I were in church, and she was sitting in front of us, and he whispered to me that she was going to say hi afterward because he borrows her notes in class all the time, but he couldn't remember her name. So when she did say hi, I introduced myself so he could hear her name and pretend he remembered her name. And that's actually the
So
first
you
time
bumped him out?
Yeah. So, yeah. But I'm sure we bumped into each other. We did the same 4-H stuff and a lot of horse stuff. And Wyoming's not that big, but, you know.
So it was music, but also some agricultural and animal care?
She was an animal science major, but I didn't bother because I just kind of thought, you know, I might as well learn something else, because it didn't really make sense to me for a professor to tell me how to run the ranch that my family had run forever. And my parents did a great job running it. So
how did you know your parents did a great job? I'm just curious.
I didn't at that age, but now I know, you know, and I knew my dad knew what he was doing, but they paid it off. And that's pretty big deal for agriculture.
Yeah.
You know, so you can't argue with that. They basically, so my grandpa had a stroke when he was 73, and I was probably 22. And Mom and Dad had just bought the place right next to Grandpa's, so they totally maxed out. We had leased it forever, so they bought it. Anyway, then all of a sudden, Grandpa goes from running the ranch every day to can't do anything. So Mom and Dad called and said, do you want to buy Grandpa's place? And of course I said yes. They said,
when was this in your life?
like 22. So this is a big
shit.
deal. Yeah,
Like,
and it's like, okay,
How are you
are
going
you
to buy
ready
Grandpa's
to...
ranch at 22?
Well, you get first-time ag loans, you borrow a ton of money, and then you go for it. And
By the way, I just have to pause. These are some dope boots.
I try. So anyway, it's, you know, it was a big decision in life, but I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I got to, you know, and I wanted to. And then they kind of, you know, figured out the loans for me, and they were like, we think you can finish school, we should be able to make this work. And then they just kind of kept doing financial planning and managed to lump it all together with what they had bought. And it basically said, you know, they were like, we think we can do this, but of course I was still welcome to come take over. It just, they were like, that way you can finish school, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so,
We're going to keep
you
the
know, that
land
was
in
only,
the family.
yeah, and that was only 20 years ago. So my mom and dad actually managed to pay off both places in 20 years. And agriculturally, that's a big deal.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And like, so Liza's family had a farm in Elizabeth, Illinois. And they rented the land out. We called him Farmer Don. His name was Don Knotts? No, I can't remember it right now. Great guy. But literally, I'd have these conversations with him. And it was always fascinating to me because the amount of money, it almost felt like he had to put basically out $1 million. $1 million between equipment,
easy,
seed, planting, fertilizing, for a 10% return. So he netted 100 G.
Maybe.
That's what he on a good year he netted 100 G. And what he did is he did corn and beans and cattle. The corn then became his hay for feed.
Okay.
And it's the highest part of Illinois, so they actually had some nice pastures, and it was along the Mississippi River, so it was pretty fertile land. But they would often have lots of flooding. Like it was like, so I agree with you. To be able to pay off 20 years.
I've told people that a lot.
That's awesome.
That it's amazing, ranchers and farmers, the money that they deal in,
That they
the
leverage.
amount, yeah,
insane.
is crazy compared to what they make. It's just to go into an operating loan, like you said, for $1 million is not that crazy.
Yep.
And I mean, it's crazy, but it's not that unheard of. And then you end up with hopefully enough to feed your family at the end.
So you're going to, we've headed into one of my favorite topics.
Okay.
And that is the stress of small business. And I've been trying to kind of take a look at what your overhead, right? We've talked about the equipment.
Sure.
We haven't talked about the horses, which all I know is to own a horse is really expensive between lodging and feeding and shoeing and taking care of, especially in a four-season town here. Besides all the buildings on the guest ranch, like how do you one is running a ranch. Another thing is becoming a manager where you have to be a leader. You're leading people. So how did you go from in learning the skill set of managing people, also leveraging the expenses for here in your books? Like, tell us kind of the business plan of running this place.
So,
and how many sleepless nights do you have?
Honestly, Carrie's the smart one. Okay, but as far as business goes and all that stuff. So, but for me, things that, like, when we got asked to take it over, had you showed me some of the stuff we would deal with staff and things like that, I would have run away. If you could have shown me a crystal ball, I would have run away. But once you say you're going to do it...
Babysitting's tough.
Yeah. So once you say you're going to do it, though, it's amazing what you'll do to not let yourself down, not let the family down, not let, to show you can do it.
No one wants to fail.
Right. So there was a lot of that. As far as people skills, I found out when I was teaching too, it's just I was able to motivate people, and I am not an intimidating person.
No, you are a very sweet man.
Well, and so I've usually been able to operate off of just, example, working, showing them what hard work looks like.
I saw you saddling this morning, which I was like, wow.
Well,
there's so many things for you to do, and I saw you saddling at 7:30 this morning.
And then, leadership-wise, it's just like I'm not going to ask anyone to do something I won't do. I've been in every septic tank on the place. I've been, I don't have this line where I think I need someone below me to do this job, And then, the expense stuff, we were really well set up. I wouldn't say we got handed a silver spoon. I sometimes like to say we earned a silver spoon. This was a sweet deal. I'm not going to lie. This was really cool. But it wasn't like we just got handed to us and it was no big deal,
And that part, I think, is key and is different than where people use that phrase silver spoon.
Right.
Like the silver spoon implies we didn't know what we got.
Okay.
The trust fund baby
right.
type thing. Like
exactly.
I can see you guys work your ass off.
Well, and that's just how I've always been able to motivate people, and then they don't want to disappoint me. I noticed that with kids, when I was coaching wrestling, when I was teaching music, they just really didn't want to disappoint me, but I think it's because they could tell what a big deal it was to me and to get them involved. And then expense-wise, one of the things is, if you want to sit down and figure out exactly what every horse cost and every, I think you can lose the picture. Because if we've learned that if we keep the place pretty full and stuff, we're going to be okay. So if I get too wrapped up in some of that, then what I lose is thinking, if I had 2 more really good horses, we could have made this many more people just love it and come back and, etc. And some of that's really hard to put a number on, like
It is.
I could see probably my in-laws cringing when I say that. But, here's a quick example too. An acquaintance of mine who's a very business person, and he is successful, asked about business. And I said, well, it's pretty darn good. And I said, in fact, we kind of have like a 2 or 3 page waiting list, for most weeks. And he said, just plain out, he said, well, then you're not charging enough. If you have a 3 page waiting list, you're not charging enough. And I said, well, but we get a lot of repeat people. We get to know them. We know that we like them. They like us. It's a perfect fit. And if you start just jumping, they understand having to increase prices, logically. But if all of a sudden you jump up, you're in a whole new category. You may have lost this clientele that you really liked. And they liked it. And you knew this was the thing for them. And I said, I said, I think that's way more important than just seeing exactly how much we can get out of every person. And he looked at me like that was the craziest thing he'd ever heard in his entire life.
I'm going to give you some validation for that. Not that I'm here to tell you to keep your prices low. You lost power yesterday.
Right.
We woke up, Liza's like, can you show me how to run these goddamn lights? Like, I can't get the lights on. I tried a few times myself, and then I went to flush the toilet. The toilet's not working. I was like, oh, we don't have power.
Yeah.
And I think some guests, if you were at a different price point, that could have been a real shit show.
Right.
Because how do you not have a generator? How is this not going? And I'll be honest with you, they lost power for about 4 hours. It was fine. They had coffee. They had breakfast. We rode horses. It was an awesome time. But we were in the van, and I told my wife, and someone said something. I said, well, you're not at the Aspen Dude Ranch or the Vail Dude Ranch. You're in the Wyoming Dude Ranch.
Which, of course,
and this is what it is. Like, this is just part of the goddamn experience. Like, so, like, I get what you're saying about that you will start to attract a different clientele who's then may want AC in the cabin and that kind of stuff. I can't tell you enough. Like, we are such a huge fans. It is so much fun. I am so, and I told your wife this. I'm gonna really kiss your ass right now,
Okay.
even more.
Okay.
I am so grateful that you guys are still doing this. My wife grew up going to a spot for fishing in Canada. She grew up as a child with her father, and they went there and they did lots of family trips. I got the opportunity once to go. Then after that place went defunct. It no longer exists. I
Yeah.
would have loved to have the experience to take my daughters there
For sure.
and fish. And they had shore lunches. It was just like this, but it was fishing. You fished in the morning, you had a shore lunch, you fished in the afternoon, you went and had dinner, and then you fished in the evening. It's just like this. That's gone. It doesn't exist. And without people like you, it's amazing. Which leads me into my next question.
Okay.
What's your why?
My
And you know
why.
what I mean by that.
Okay.
You could be doing something different,
Yeah.
making probably more money.
I guess nothing that I ever seemed interested in was a money making career. But okay, the why. So for the most part, definitely it's become what an amazing place to raise my kids. That's definitely become a deal.
And it's impressive that they love it.
Oh, and it's neat because they understand they're lucky, but they don't totally understand. That's not their fault. How would they? But
It's all you know. It's all you know right
yeah,
now.
but they meet enough kids and stuff that think this is so cool that they're like, well, yeah, it is cool, and so that's for one for sure. I can be alone all day, or I can be with people all day. I like that either way. Of course, the horse thing and the cowboy thing and the ranching, I just grew up doing that, and I just don't ever want to do something else. The why still is, there's a lot of whys. I just, I really get a kick out of helping people have a great time, because when I go on a vacation with my family and we have a great time, I understand how cool that is. And so if I can see that happening for other families, that's pretty darn special. Part of it is, kind of trying to build up something where, if one of the kids wants to take this over, or one of the kids wants to maybe go back to my family's place and run it, that we can help them out with getting all that going. And land prices are ridiculous up here, so the competition to ever expand is impossible. And so you just want to be able to have enough assets and work hard enough to have enough connections and all of this stuff figured out, so that you can give those opportunities to those kids, because they won't be able to without it. If my family's place was gone and Carrie and I decided to cash this in, and someday they decided they wanted a ranch or something like that, it's not going to happen.
Which is another question of mine. Part of this land value of going bonkers is pandemic. Part of it seems Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I grew up going to a dude ranch in Wisconsin. Nothing nearly remotely as amazing as this. But like my wife and I just organically love cowboy Western lifestyle. What's your take on that? Yellowstone, we love thumbs up, thumbs down, like.
Okay. Yeah, I bet you can see this coming. I couldn't stand Yellowstone.
Which
we
is,
watched
which
one
is the
season.
response that I anticipated.
We watched one
But
season.
people want to know
Okay.
truly from a rancher what.
Then
take.
don't watch the show, because it's not even close. But here's the thing on Yellowstone. The only problem is I got excited. I thought, oh, a show about ranching, and it's going to be like in Wyoming or Montana. That's so cool. And then now they've got the whole population thinking that we fly around in helicopters and shoot
You don't
Indians
fly
on the
around in helicopters.
reservation and blow up streams to reroute them. By the way, God doesn't reroute a stream in Montana or Wyoming. They will make him put it back. Okay? I don't care if the governor's your girlfriend. So, and there's the obvious stuff, the like
The
when you watch
storyline.
the old Western
They
and the
needed a
guy
storyline.
shoots 7 times with his 6-shooter. But you can let some of that go. And so there was plenty of that. But the whole like letting anyone think that that's what our life is like, that we just have all this money and do whatever the heck we want and rules don't apply to us. And it's the opposite. We're all scratching by. So they finally have a chance to do a show about a ranch, and they pick the maybe one place in the entire world where the guy flies around in a helicopter and does whatever he wants. This just doesn't happen. It's not true. It's so fake. Plus, it was very dark and depressing. So
It is.
I looked
it
at
is
Carrie
very bad.
after the first season. I said, not one good thing has happened to a single character in this entire show. And so we agreed to be done with it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love hearing your
So.
take on it.
Well, the Hollywood thing. So I've learned to there's a lot of ranchers that'll kind of give guests, or a hard time, like, oh, they want to come out and play cowboy, and you're like, so what? That means they think this is cool. They would take one look at what you do and be like, you are the coolest guy in the world. What is wrong with that? Why do you have a problem with that? And so instead, I've really learned to look at it like, I've got this chance to kind of show people what it actually is like and answer these questions. We are not good at telling our side of the story. When you have issues like wolves or all this overgrazing, we hear that the ranchers overgraze and this and that. And so then you grab one guest and you say, how would my family run the same ranch for 100 years if we overgrazed it? We couldn't. And they go, that makes sense. But that's not their fault. All they've ever heard is the other side of the story. And we're terrible at telling our side of the story. We just want to sit around and gripe and say those stupid people don't know what it's like. Then we need to tell them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And once again, so grateful for you to sit down and have this conversation and to tell that part of the story.
Sure.
The other part that I'm grateful for is to hear how you are thinking about your family, because that's how I think about my family.
Yeah.
We invest in real estate heavily, and as an opportunity if they want to be into real estate, or if they need some type of supplemental income in the future of their lives. I think another thing that I am grateful for what you do here, and I think you touch on it, is that, and it's what I like, what I do selling real estate, I help people create memories for their family for the future. I help them find a home to create those memories.
Yeah.
You create memories that my wife and I have been relishing in all this week from when we were here
Right.
2 different times. And
Yep.
that is probably one of the most amazing things that you guys do here. And I know it comes with a shitload of work, but we're grateful.
Well, and we're getting to that point now where we're seeing the kids come back with their kids, and that is so cool. You'll lose them for a while. They're having their babies and getting a career and all that stuff, and then they start thinking, what was really cool to me? Oh, when my parents took me there, and they're bringing them back, and that's really cool to see.
Absolutely. One last question.
Okay.
Why do people call it a dude ranch versus a guest ranch?
There's a lot of history to it, but dude ranching started mostly during the Depression. And it's kind of like now, I was going to elaborate on the land prices. The people that had money still had money. The people that didn't had nothing. There was no in between. And so the ranchers saying, oh my gosh, we got to do something, started marketing these vacations, and it was the rich people. It was Rockefellers and stuff that would. But back then, you'd get on a train and you'd ride the train, and then they might pick you up in a stagecoach, and you would stay for a month a lot of times, because by the time you did all this traveling, you're like, I'm not turning around at the end of the week and going back.
Absolutely. And you had to have a lot of money to be able to take a month or 2 months off.
So what's the difference, right? So they would buy the fancy Western clothes and get duded up. That's all it is they would get really duded up. And so then it became the Dude Ranch.
Got it.
So we prefer going guest ranch because I treat people just like they're just like me. Customer service is different, but I mean, I'm not saying you're better than me, I'm better than you. Any of this stuff, we don't get into all that junk that you do sometimes with the higher echelon of hospitality. And I don't think anyone wants that. At least in our, just treat me like a regular guy. I love it.
Listen, you saw me walk into the saloon my first night here and came up and said, "Oh my God, you're back."
Yeah.
You may not remember my name, but you hadn't seen me in 9 years and knew who I was.
Right.
And that's exactly what you're speaking to.
Yeah, it was cool because I looked at Cuppy, who's been here with me for a year, because at the moment, if you'd have told me it was last year, I would have believed it. I mean, obviously, when we rehashed it, I was like, oh my gosh, it was that long ago. But I looked at him because I was like, and he goes, I don't know him. Anyway, but yeah, and that's pretty darn common, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost all the time when people say, I'm like, well, welcome back. And they'll say, really? That was 7 years ago. And I'll say, I thought it was last summer. So that's pretty cool too.
It is. So I know you have a lot of guests who love to chat with you and see you for this evening. So go do your show. We'll be down.
Okay.
Brent,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it.